Welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 3 mistakes when Commander deck building. And before I get to the video, I'm going to talk about my Patreon here briefly. I do have a Patreon. The link is in the description below. I also have a Discord where me and my patrons discuss various topics on Commander and Magic in general. And of course, we also play casual Commander games on there as well via Spell Table. But also on my Patreon, I do deck techs for my patrons, and I also do deck doctors, and that's why I am bringing this up here. I did my first deck doctor video very early on my channel, and basically I took a patron's deck list that they had given me and sort of doctored it and did some changes that I would do, and I liked that video so much that I ended up doing it regularly on my Patreon. So every week I do a deck doctor where I take a couple of patrons' decks and sort of make the changes or suggestions that I would make for that deck. My patrons seem to like it a lot, and the reason why I'm talking about this today is because there's a couple of fallacies that I see come up from time to time when doing those deck doctors, and that's what this video is going to be about today. The 3 sort of fallacies that I see when deck building are things that I see when I do those deck doctor videos, and so I'm going to be using actual examples here that I have taken from those videos. So the first one I'm going to talk about is cards that seem good because they fit the archetype that you are doing, but that is not necessarily the case. So for example, one I did recently, they had Override in there and Assert Authority. Now, as you can probably guess by looking at these cards, they were doing an artifact theme, right? Override is 2 and a blue instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each artifact you control. Assert Authority is 5 blue instant, has affinity for artifacts, which means it costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. Counter target spell, if it's countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into owner's graveyard. Now, if you're in an artifact theme, these cards can seem pretty good, but really they're not that good, right? This is sort of the fallacy I'm talking about, where I'm building an artifact deck, so this seems like a good fit because these spells are reliant on artifacts, but you have to remember we have pretty much every card ever printed in Magic to choose from when building Commander decks, so really just a straight up counter spell is better than both of these, right? Even though a card might seem good in whatever archetype or whatever tribe you are playing, sometimes the just straight up option is even better. I mean, it is possible that your Assert Authority is going to cost just a blue and a blue, same as a counterspell, and it will exile, which is better, but also it's likely that it's going to cost 3 or 4 or possibly even 7 if someone has just wiped all the artifacts off the board, which obviously is just a really, really bad counterspell. So just a straight up counterspell is probably going to be better in almost every situation, right? When building a deck, sometimes you can get stuck in using the stuff that seems to fit the archetype or the tribe that you are building around, when really just the most basic option is sometimes going to be better, even if it doesn't necessarily fit the theme that you're doing. Sticking with the counterspell theme, you have, say, Ixidor's Will or Psychic Trance, which again, you know, you have 2 and a blue instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2 for each wizard on the battlefield, and Psychic Trance, 2 blue instant until end of turn, wizards you control gain tap counter target spell. Even though these seem to fit really well in a wizard tribal deck, pretty much every single situation, a just straight up counterspell is going to be better than both of these, right? So it might seem flavorful, you know, maybe you want to do that just for the flavor value. It does fit the theme, but at the end of the day, even though it seems good to play cards like this because, hey, I'm playing a wizard tribal deck, it's going to be great there, a straight up counterspell is just better than both of these, right? So just be careful when you're building a deck that is a particular theme, a particular tribe, or whatever archetype, not to get stuck into the trap of putting stuff in there that will fit the theme of what you're doing, but is going to be inferior to maybe a better option that is just the most basic option that you have available to you. Let's get to the second mistake that people make, which is sort of the what if combo scenario. I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but again, this is one that I see all the time. And I did a deck doctor recently where my patron had Obliterate in their deck, right? 6 red sorcery. This spell can't be countered, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and lands. They can't be regenerated. And typically you see this in a deck where a player is probably going to end up most likely ending the game when they cast it because they give themselves a huge advantage. And I thought it was a curious fit in that deck. But again, it was an artifact deck and they had Darksteel Forge in there, right? 9 mana artifact. Of course, artifacts you control are indestructible. So their thinking there was, I'm going to get my Darksteel Forge in play and then I'm going to cast my Obliterate. Now, the problem with this and why I think this is a bit of a fallacy is you put Darksteel Forge in your artifact deck. Of course you do. It's a fantastic fit in any artifact deck. Making all your artifacts indestructible is fantastic, but Obliterate is not fantastic in any artifact deck, right? And whenever you're putting these sort of combos in your deck, what you have to look at is, does each individual card work in the deck, right? It's fine to put a combo in your deck if each card is actually good. You want to put an Isochron Scepter Dramatic Reversal in your deck, say, as a combo. That works in almost every deck because Dramatic Reversal is always going to be a usable card. Untapping your stuff is good in any deck. And of course, Isochron Scepter is good in any deck because you don't have to put your Dramatic Reversal on it. You can put any instant on it that costs 2 or less, and it's always going to be a good card in your deck. Is Obliterate always going to be a good card in your deck? Probably not, especially if you're in an artifact theme. So whenever you're putting these 2-card combos in your deck, you should be thinking to yourself, okay, well, if I get my Darksteel Forge, my Obliterate's going to be pretty good. But what if I don't get it? Then Obliterate is just an 8 mana spell that's probably going to be sitting in my hand for the whole game, and I'm not going to be able to use it. What if somebody exiles my Darksteel Forge after I've already played it? Now when I draw my Obliterate, again, it's not going to be very good because I'm not going to be able to take advantage of it. So it almost becomes a dead card. Avoid those cards that will be dead cards if you don't get the other piece of your combo, right? That's essentially what I'm talking about here. You want to put a Kiki-Jiki Deceiver Exarch combo in your deck. Okay, how good are both of those cards in your deck if you don't get the other piece, right? If you plan on tutoring for those pieces and you're definitely going to get them and you're definitely going to combo off, okay. But again, I've seen a lot of times where people will just chuck a Kiki-Jiki Deceiver Exarch in their Izzet deck on the off chance that they actually get those 2 cards and then they can end the game. But how good are those cards if you don't get both of them, right? That's essentially what I'm saying here. Kiki-Jiki is probably always going to be a good card in any deck, so you're good to go there, right? It's just like with Isochron Scepter. Those cards are always good in any deck. Deceiver Exarch, how good is that in your deck? Probably not great. Maybe you want to go with like a Zealous Conscripts, which again is a card that you could put in any deck and it's always going to be at least decent in a deck. So just be careful when you're combining combos in your deck, unless you're specifically tutoring for them and trying to combo off to win. If you're just chucking in a card because it happens to combo with another card in your deck, make sure it's actually a decent card in your deck and it's not just going to be a dead card if you lose that other combo piece. Which brings me to my third fallacy that I see in Commander deck building, which is basically going in the wrong direction. So you start out in a certain direction, whether it be I'm building around my commander or I'm building around whatever the theme is for my deck, and then I find another theme that fits with that theme, and then I find another theme that doesn't fit with the first theme but fits with the second theme. So basically I'm sort of trailing off in a different direction from where I've started, and my deck sort of becomes a jumbled mess. And this happened with another deck doctor I did recently for a patron who had a Dralnu Lichlord deck. Very interesting commander, 3 blue and a black zombie wizard, 3/3. If damage would be dealt to Dralnu Lichlord, sacrifice that many permanents instead. That's not great. However, has a really powerful ability. Tap target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So when they were building this deck, what they ended up thinking was, okay, I want to put stuff in my graveyard, right? If I have lots of instants and sorceries in my graveyard, then of course I'll have lots of targets for my commander's ability. So what they did is they put those blue-black wheel effects in there, like Whispering Madness and Windfall. Because of course those wheel effects are good for filling your graveyard with stuff. I don't think that's the best way. I won't get too deep on what I ended up giving them as advice for their deck. However, once they started putting in those wheel effects, they thought, oh, well, I'm going to be drawing and discarding a lot. So heck, why don't I throw in Bone Miser and Ominous Seas? Of course, Bone Miser is going to give you all those benefits when you're discarding, which those wheel effects are going to do. And Ominous Seas is going to give you a benefit when you're drawing lots. The problem is now we've gone off in a different direction from where we've started, right? Neither of the these cards have anything to do with our commander. The assumption is here, oh, well, we might be wheeling a lot, so let's throw in stuff that will benefit us from wheeling, but these are things that have nothing to do with your commander, right? Bone Miser is a great card in a discard theme, but what if you don't get any of your wheel effects? They only actually had about 3 wheel effects because there's not a ton in Dimir colors, of course. So what if you don't get any of them? Now your Bone Miser is a literal dead card in your deck. It's just a 5 mana 4/4. It is not interacting with your commander at all. Now, that isn't to say that every card in your deck has to synergize with your commander, but it should synergize with the theme of what you're doing. Again, getting back to what I talked about in number 2, if you have that card that is relying on another card in the 99 of your deck, what if you don't get that other card? Now you have a card that is not very good at all, like Ominous Seas, or is a completely dead card like Bone Miser. And this is what happens when you can sort of trail off in a different direction, where starting in a certain direction with my commander or the theme of what I'm doing in my deck, and I find something that works good with what my commander's doing, and then I find something that works good with that thing that works good with my commander, not necessarily with my commander. I've sort of skipped over. So the first thing I'm doing in my deck works great with my commander, but the second thing I'm doing in my deck works good with the first thing, not necessarily with my commander. So now I need a whole bunch of things to sort of come together in my deck in order for these things to actually work out, or I end up with a lot of fluff in my deck that doesn't really do a whole lot. And this can happen a lot. You know, I hear my patrons say all the time, my deck is sort of just spinning its wheels. It's not really going anywhere. Well, that's probably because you have an Ominous Seas and a Bone Miser in play, and you don't have any of your wheel effects. So those 2 cards aren't really doing a whole lot. Again, that doesn't mean that you absolutely have to have every card in your deck synergizing with your commander, but just think, how good is that card going to be? If I don't get that other card in the 99, right? If I get that other card, it's going to make this card great, but what if I don't? Now that card's not going to really be doing much at all, right? If you look at a Drow New Lich Lord again, for example, that's not a wheel commander. That's not a commander that you want to be casting wheel effects all the time with necessarily. It does work with your commander, so you just want to be careful not to get into that trap. You can do a lot of different things in your deck, but try to generally stay focused with what you're doing. Try to have the cards in your deck synergizing with each other at least a little bit if they are doing something very specific, right? I'm not talking about the removal, something like an Eternal Witness. Cards like that are always going to be good in every deck. Again, Isochron Scepter, Kiki Jiki, those are cards that are always going to be good in any deck. But if you have cards that are doing very specific things, make sure they're not just going to be sitting on the battlefield or sitting in your hand doing nothing if you don't get that other combo piece or that other synergizing piece that is necessary to make it good. But that is it for today. Just 3 sort of mistakes or fallacies that I see from time to time when I'm doing my Deck Doctor videos. And if you are new to Commander, those Deck Doctor videos that I am doing are really, really great for giving you sort of a general idea of the directions you should be going. And if you want to watch them, feel free to join my Patreon. Again, the link is in the description below. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.